Henry VII was the first monarch of that kingdom who established a standing body of armed men. This was a band of 50 archers called Yeomen of the Guard, and this institution, notwithstanding the smallness of the number, was to prevent discontent, disguised under the pretense of majesty and grandeur. In 1684, the standing forces were so much augmented that Rapin says, "The king, in order to make his people fully sensible of their new slavery, affected to muster his troops, which amounted to 4,000 well-armed and disciplined men." I think our army at this time consists of more than 70 regiments. The method of taxing by excise was first introduced amidst the convulsions of the civil wars. Extreme necessity was pretended for it, and its short continuance promised. After the Restoration, an excise upon beer, ale, and other liquors was granted to the king, one half in fee, the other for life, as an equivalent for the court of wards. Upon James II's accession, the Parliament gave him the first excise with an additional duty on wine, tobacco, and some other things. Since the Revolution, it has been extended to salt, candles, leather, hides, hops, soap, paper, pasteboards, millboards, scaleboards, vellum, parchment, starch, silks, calicos, linens, stuffs, printed, stained, etc., wire, wrought plate, coffee, tea, chocolate, etc. Thus a standing army and excise have, from their first slender origins, though always hated, always feared, always opposed, at length swelled up to their vast present bulk. These facts are sufficient to support what I have said. 'Tis true that all the mischiefs apprehended by our ancestors from a standing army and excise have not yet happened, but it does not follow from thence that they will not happen. The inside of a house may catch fire, and the most valuable apartments be ruined before the flames burst out. The question in these cases is not what evil has actually attended particular measures, but what evil in the nature of things is likely to attend them. Certain circumstances may for some time delay effects that were reasonably expected and that must ensue. There was a long period after the Romans had prorogued his command to Quintus Publius Philo before that example destroyed their liberty. All our kings from the Revolution to the present reign have been foreigners. Their ministers generally continued but a short time in authority, and they themselves were mild and virtuous princes. A bold, ambitious prince, possessed of great abilities, firmly fixed in his throne by descent, served by ministers like himself, and rendered either venerable or terrible by the glory of his successes, may execute what his predecessors did not dare to attempt. Henry IV tottered in his seat during his whole reign. Henry V drew the strength of that kingdom into France to carry on his wars there, and left the commons at home protesting that the people were not bound to serve out of the realm. It is true that a strong spirit of liberty subsists at present in Great Britain, but what reliance is to be placed in the temper of a people when the prince is possessed of an unconstitutional power, our own history can sufficiently inform us. When Charles II had strengthened himself by the return of the garrison of Tangier, England, says Rapin, saw on a sudden an amazing revolution, saw herself stripped of all her rights and privileges, excepting such as the king should vouchsafe to grant her. And what is more astonishing, the English themselves delivered up these very rights and privileges to Charles II, which they had so passionately and, if I may say it, furiously defended against the designs of Charles I. This happened only 36 years after this last prince had been beheaded. Some persons are of opinion that liberty is not violated but by such open acts of force, but they seem to be greatly mistaken. I could mention a period within these 40 years when almost as great a change of disposition was produced by the secret measures of a long administration as by Charles' violence. Liberty perhaps is never exposed to so much danger as when the people believe there is the least, for it may be subverted, and yet they not think so. Public disgusting acts are seldom practiced by the ambitious at the beginning of their designs. Such conduct silences and discourages the weak and the wicked, who would otherwise have been their advocates or accomplices. It is of great consequence to allow those who, upon any account, are inclined to favor them, something specious to say in their defense. Their power may be fully established, though it would not be safe for them to do whatever they please. For there are things which at some times even slaves will not bear. Julius Caesar and Oliver Cromwell did not dare to assume the title of king. The Grand Seigneur dares not lay a new tax. The King of France dares not be a Protestant. Certain popular points may be left untouched, and yet freedom be extinguished. The commonalty of Venice imagine themselves free because they are permitted to do what they ought not. But I quit a subject that would lead me too far from my purpose. By the late Act of Parliament, taxes are to be levied upon us for defraying the charge of the administration of justice, the support of civil government, and the expenses of defending His Majesty's dominions in America. If any man doubts what ought to be the conduct of these colonies on this occasion, I would ask him these questions. Has not the Parliament expressly avowed their intention of raising money from us for certain purposes? Is not this scheme popular in Great Britain? Will the taxes imposed by the late act answer these purposes? If it will, must it not take an immense sum from us? If it will not, is it to be expected that the Parliament will not fully execute their intention when it is pleasing at home and not opposed here? Must not this be done by imposing new taxes? Will not every addition thus made to our taxes be an addition to the power of the British legislature by increasing the number of officers in the collection? Will not every additional tax therefore render it more difficult to abrogate any of them? When a branch of revenue is once established, does it not appear to many people invidious and undutiful to attempt to abolish it? If taxes sufficient to accomplish the intention of the Parliament are imposed by the Parliament, what taxes will remain to be imposed by our assemblies? If no material taxes remain to be imposed by them, what must become of them and the people they represent? If any person considers these things and yet thinks our liberties are in no danger, I wonder at that person's security. One other argument is to be added, which by itself, I hope, will be sufficient to convince the most incredulous man on this continent that the late Act of Parliament is only designed to be a precedent, whereon the future vassalage of these colonies may be established. Every duty thereby laid on articles of British manufacture is laid on some commodity, upon the exportation of which from Great Britain a drawback is payable. Those drawbacks in most of the articles are exactly double to the duties given by the late Act. The Parliament therefore might, in half a dozen lines, have raised much more money, only by stopping the drawbacks in the hands of the officers at home, on exportation to these colonies, that by the solemn imposition of taxes upon us to be collected here. Probably the artful contrivers of this act formed it in this manner, in order to reserve to themselves, in case of any objections being made to it, this specious pretense, that the drawbacks are gifts to the colonies, and that the late act only lessens those gifts. But the truth is that the drawbacks are intended for the encouragement and promotion of British manufactures and commerce, and are allowed on exportation to any foreign parts, as well as on exportation to these provinces. Besides, care has been taken to slide into the Act some articles on which there are no drawbacks. However, the whole duties laid by the late Act on all the articles therein specified are so small that they will not amount to as much as the drawbacks, which are allowed on part of them only. If therefore the sum to be obtained by the late Act had been the sole object in forming it, there would not have been any occasion for the Commons of Great Britain to give and grant to His Majesty rates and duties for raising a revenue in His Majesty's dominions in America, for making a more certain and adequate provision for defraying the charges of the administration of justice, the support of civil government, and the expense of defending the said dominions, nor would there have been any occasion for an expensive board of commissioners and all the other new charges to which we are made liable. Upon the whole, for my part, I regard the late Act as an experiment made of our disposition. It is a bird sent out over the waters to discover whether the waves that lately agitated this part of the world with such violence are yet subsided. If this adventurer gets footing here, we shall quickly find it to be of the kind described by the poet in Felix Wattes, a direful foreteller of future calamities.